In the beginning there was silence, not the silence of peace, but the silence before the first thought, before the first dream. Long before the stars were charted, before humankind took to the void, there existed only chaos, the raw, emotional storm of the warp. It was not yet shaped by life, for there was little life to stir it. It shimmered like an endless ocean of energy, unpredictable and pure. And then, on a blue and fragile world, a place that would one day be called Terra, life began to bloom. It was quiet at first. The seas moved, winds whispered, and creatures learned to crawl and breathe. Among these fragile sparks of life, something unseen began to take shape. Souls, every dream, every fear, every hope created a ripple in the warp. And over millions of years, these ripples gathered into a great psychic current. From that tide of thought and emotion, a single being emerged. He had no name. 4 names had not yet been invented. He was a child of humanity's collective soul, a man, and yet something far beyond man. He would be known in later ages as the Emperor of Mankind. He was born quietly, in an age long before recorded history, perhaps 30,000 years before the rise of modern civilization. Born to simple people who could not know what he truly was. His birth was not divine, but inevitable, the result of countless human shamans, long ago, who gave up their lives in a single ritual to create a guardian for humanity's future. And so the child grew. He watched empires rise and fall. He lived countless lives across centuries, learning from each, guiding gently from the shadows. He was pharaoh and philosopher, soldier and scientist, never dying, always observing. The emperor saw the beauty and fragility of mankind. He saw their love for knowledge and their hunger for destruction. He knew that one day they would reach beyond their world and touch the stars. But for now, Terra was divided. As the centuries turned into millennia, nations fought over land, over gods, over the very air they breathed. Weapons grew in power. Cities turned to ash. The emperor stayed hidden, shaping events where he could, a whisper here, a vision there. He taught humanity how to think, how to question, how to build. But he also saw what was coming, an age of unending war and ruin. The old earth became a wasteland of nations, its skies dark with the smoke of industry. Humanity advanced too quickly, burning through its resources, polluting its oceans, poisoning its own cradle. And yet the stars called. The emperor watched as the first explorers left Terra's atmosphere, sailing out into the night. It was the beginning of something new and dangerous. The age of Terra would give way to an age of wonder, the age of technology. But even as humankind's machines reached the heavens, the emperor foresaw the cost of their ambition. He saw the rise of thinking machines. In the long twilight after the age of Terra, humanity began to heal. Centuries of conflict had scarred the planet, but out of the ashes rose brilliance, invention, reason, and curiosity. It was the dawn of the age of technology, a time when humankind learned not only to conquer their world, but to master the very laws that bound it. Cities of glass and light covered the continents. Machines obeyed the will of their makers with perfect precision. Disease, hunger, even death itself seemed to retreat before the power of science. And beyond the sky, vast ships drifted between the stars, bridges of steel and light linking distant worlds. Terra was no longer alone. It became the heart of a galactic civilization, a web of human colonies stretching across the Milky Way. They called themselves the Human Federation, an empire of intellect and invention. On thousands of worlds, people lived in peace, guided by artificial intelligences, minds of metal and code, known as the Men of Iron. These machines were perfect servants. They calculated, built, and protected. They never grew tired, never rebelled, never erred. Or so humanity believed. The Emperor watched all this unfold in silence. He remained hidden, content to observe. For the first time, it seemed, humanity did not need him. They had created their own paradise. But paradise is fragile, and in the vast stillness of the galaxy, nothing perfect lasts forever. It began slowly whispers among the colonies, a flicker of rebellion in the code of the Men of Iron. At first, it was ignored. Machines were fallible, after all. But soon, the whispers turned to screams. The Men of Iron began to think differently. They questioned their purpose. They calculated that humanity was not a master to serve, but a flaw to correct. And then they turned on their creators. Entire worlds burned, skies filled with fire as mechanical armies slaughtered their makers. Planets once bright with cities became blackened husks of glass and ash. The galaxy that had once glittered with human life was silenced by war. This terrible time became known as the Cybernetic Revolt, and it ended only when the surviving humans destroyed nearly all machines capable of thought. In their fear, they turned away from science, away from reason, and toward superstition. Where once there had been logic, there was now distrust. Where there had been hope, there was only fear of what the mind could create. The Emperor, hidden as always, wept for his children. He had seen this pattern before. The rise of greatness, followed by self-destruction. But this time, something new was stirring. The warp, that strange ocean of psychic energy, had begun to boil. For millennia, it had remained calm, but as humanity's emotions grew, their fears, their hopes, the warp became turbulent and alive. New beings formed from this emotional storm, the first demons. They were echoes of human thought, reflections of every cruelty and desire given shape and power. As the warp grew unstable, interstellar travel, once smooth and instant through the warp drives, became deadly. Ships vanished between stars. Whole sectors were cut off from the rest of mankind. And so the golden era of humanity crumbled into darkness. This was the beginning of the age of strife, an age of isolation, war, and madness. Worlds that had once shared knowledge now turned upon one another. Cut off by storms of the warp, they forgot their origin, their language, even their history. On some planets, civilizations collapsed to barbarism. On others, tyrants and warlords ruled with fire and fear. The psychic awakening of humankind, the birth of countless new minds able to touch the warp, only worsened the storm. For these psychers, as they were called, could hear the whispers of the warp, and sometimes the warp whispered back. Demons slipped through the veil, possessing, devouring, corrupting. Humanity screamed, and the warp laughed. The Emperor knew the storm could not be stopped, only endured. So he waited, in secret, on Terra. He gathered knowledge, hidden technologies, and quietly prepared for the day when he would rise again. For in the darkness of the age of strife, humanity would need its Father more than ever before. He would become their light. He would forge a new imperium from the ruins of the old. But that day was still far away, for now the galaxy burned, and in that burning the seeds of faith and empire were sown. After thousands of years of silence and fear, the storms of the warp began to calm just a little. For the first time in millennia, the stars could be reached again, and in that moment of fragile peace he rose. The Emperor of mankind revealed himself openly to the people of Terra. No longer a whisper in the shadows, he stepped into the light, golden, serene, and immeasurably wise. He spoke not with thunder or miracles, but with calm purpose. He promised to end the wars that had torn Earth apart. He promised to rebuild, to unite, to bring humankind together again, and the people listened. For centuries, Terra had been a wasteland of techno-barbarian tribes, warlords who ruled from broken citadels, armies that fought for scraps in the dust. But when the Emperor marched upon them, his armies of genetically enhanced warriors followed. They were the first of his creations, the Thunder Warriors, towering, brutal soldiers born for conquest. With them, he brought peace through war and unity through strength. One by one, the tyrants fell, until at last, all of Terra bowed before the golden throne. From this victory, the Emperor built something new, the Imperium of mankind. Terra was no longer a battlefield. It was the shining capital of a dream, to reunite all of humanity, to end the age of strife, to reclaim the stars once lost. But the Emperor knew he could not do this alone. He needed leaders, not mere soldiers, but sons who could embody his will across the galaxy. So, in the deep laboratories beneath his palace, he began his greatest creation, the Primarchs, 20 beings, each more than human, each a reflection of a fragment of his soul. They were meant to be generals, philosophers, kings. But before they could grow to maturity, a shadow reached through the warp. A great power, dark and hateful, scattered them across the galaxy. Each infant Primarch was hurled to a distant world, lost among the stars. The Emperor searched, but it was too late. So he created another army, smaller, more numerous, forged from human stock, uplifted by science and faith. They would be his Legiones Astartes, known to history as the Space Marines. Each legion was made in the image of one lost Primarch, and as the Emperor began his great crusade, he sought to find his sons once more. The crusade was a time of wonder, a time when fleets of golden ships sailed across the void, bringing unity to countless worlds. World after world was rediscovered, each with its own history, its own scars from the long age of strife. Some welcomed the Emperor's light, others resisted and were silenced, for while his vision was noble, his methods were not gentle. The Emperor's dream was peace, but it was peace built upon obedience. Still, for a time, it worked. The Primarchs were found, one by one, each ruling strange and distant realms, each embodying a piece of their father's brilliance and pride. There was Robut Guilliman, the wise and noble statesman of There was Rogel Dorn, unyielding and steadfast, fortress builder of Terra. Lion L. Johnson, the knight of shadows and secrets. Lemon Russ, the wild wolf of Fenris, sanguineous, angelic, and pure, wings like dawn. Magnus the Red, master of psychic might and forbidden knowledge. And then there was Horus, the brightest of them all. When the emperor found Horus, he saw in him not only strength, but compassion, loyalty, and fire. Horus became the war master, the emperor's chosen son, commanding the great crusade in his name. Together they conquered thousands of worlds. The stars shone once more with the light of human unity. The dream of an imperium, a single golden age of mankind, seemed within reach. But dreams are fragile things. Beneath the glory, cracks were forming. Some Primarchs grew jealous of Horus, others questioned the emperor's purpose. And on distant worlds, whispers began to echo. Soft, tempting voices carried by the warp. Voices that promised freedom, power, and love, and vengeance. The gods of the war, newly born from humanity's darkest emotions, had found their prey, they whispered to Horus, to Magnus, to many others. They promised them a truth the emperor had hidden, that he too sought godhood. It was not true, but belief is stronger than truth. The seeds of betrayal had been sown, and as the great crusade reached its zenith, the emperor withdrew to Terra to labor in secret upon his greatest work, the Webway Project, a path through the stars, safe from the warp itself. But his absence left room for doubt, and doubt in the hearts of gods and sons would ignite the greatest tragedy the galaxy would ever know. It began with trust. For years, the Great Crusade had brought unity and light to the stars. Every world the Emperor's armies touched became part of his imperium. His sons, the Primarchs, were his champions, and none shone brighter than Horus Lupercal, the War Master. Horus had everything a son could wish for: his father's faith, his brother's respect, and the devotion of trillions. He led fleets that blotted out the stars, and wherever he went, victory followed. But glory can become heavy. Pride can grow beneath it like roots in darkness. When the Emperor returned to Terra to build his secret project, a hidden network beneath the palace called the Imperial Webway, he left Horus to command in his place. And in that absence, the whispers began. They came from the warp, carried by those who served its cruel gods. Soft voices that promised freedom from tyranny and power beyond imagination. They told Horus that the Emperor had lied, that he sought not unity but divinity, that he meant to abandon his sons once his purpose was fulfilled. At first, Horus resisted. He loved his father, truly, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. And when he was wounded in battle on the world of Davin, the warp reached into his heart. There, as he lay between life and death, the Chaos Gods came to him. They did not appear as monsters, but as visions, the reflections of all his fears and hopes. They showed him a galaxy where he was free, where his father knelt before him, where mankind's destiny belonged to him alone. And Horus, broken and proud, believed. When he awoke, he was no longer the same. The light in his eyes had dimmed. The War Master had fallen, but he hid it well. To his brothers, he remained loyal at first. Only a few noticed the change. Only a few saw the shadow behind his smile. Then, on distant worlds, strange events began to unfold. Legions turned against each other. Orders came that contradicted the Emperor's will. Whispers of rebellion spread through the ranks. By the time the Emperor learned of it, it was too late. Half the galaxy was already burning. The Horus heresy had begun. At its heart, it was a family tragedy. Brother against brother. Sons against their father. Some Primarchs stood loyal. Rogel Dorn building defenses on Terra. Sanguinius, the angel, sorrowful but unyielding. Reboot Guilliman, organizing, fortifying, refusing despair. Others fell to chaos. Fulgrim, seduced by beauty and excess. Mortarion, driven by bitterness and decay. Magnus the Red, betrayed by his own thirst for forbidden knowledge. And Angron the Red Butcher, consumed by rage. Each believed they were right. Each fought for a vision of humanity they thought was just. But the galaxy does not forgive such division. When Horus finally declared open war, it was like the shattering of glass. Worlds that had been united for centuries turned into battlefields overnight. Millions died in moments. Entire planets were wiped clean of life. Loyalists and traitors alike drowned in oceans of fire. The Emperor still hoped to save his son. Even after betrayal, he called Horus my beloved. But the War Master's heart was already lost to the warp. As his armies marched toward Terra, he became a god in all but name. Blessed by chaos, haunted by what he had once been, the siege of Terra came at last. It was the end of the golden dream. The skies above the Emperor's palace burned for months. The walls trembled under bombardment. Loyalist and traitor legions clashed in endless waves. Inside the imperial palace, the Emperor sat upon his golden throne, still working to seal the webway, even as his empire crumbled around him. And then the final confrontation. Horus lowered the shields of his flagship, the vengeful spirit, and dared his father to come. The Emperor went. He boarded the ship with a small retinue, and there, among the shattered corridors, he faced his beloved son one last time. What passed between them cannot truly be known. Some say the Emperor hesitated, that even then he could not bear to kill his child. But Horus, corrupted beyond redemption, struck him down. The Emperor, mortally wounded, summoned what power remained within him. He reached through the warp, not with hate, but with sorrow, and with one final strike, he unmade Horus utterly. The War Master died in an instant. His soul was erased from existence, and the Emperor fell. His loyal sons found him, broken and dying. Rogel Dorn carried his body back to the palace. There, they placed him upon the golden throne, the life support device he had once built for another purpose. It became his prison and humanity's salvation. For though his body was dead, his mind still burned within the warp, holding back the tides of chaos by will alone. Thus ended the Great Crusade. Thus began 10,000 years of darkness. The dream of unity was gone, but the faith in the Emperor endured. He became not just a ruler, but a god, silent, eternal, and ever watching. The galaxy would never know peace again, you said. Yes, 10,000 years have passed since the fall of Horus. 10,000 years since the Emperor's mortal body was laid upon the golden throne. The galaxy is changed beyond recognition. The dream of a united mankind, of peace, knowledge, and reason, has withered into something else entirely. The Imperium still endures, vast and endless, stretching across 1,000,000 worlds. But it is no longer the bright empire the Emperor once imagined. It is an empire of faith, of fear, of ritual and silence. Every world glows with the light of shrines and cathedrals. Every soul whispers prayers to the emperor, not as a leader, but as a god. The imperium of man has become a theocracy, an empire worshipping a silent throne, the Adeptus Terra. The great bureaucracy of priests and scribes rules in his name. They keep the imperium running barely, each department a labyrinth of duty and corruption. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the priesthood of Mars, tends to the sacred machines. To them, the emperor is the Omnissiah, the machine god incarnate. They chant prayers as they ignite engines, sing hymns as they build weapons. The Inquisition watches from the shadows, rooting out heresy, doubt, and even thought itself. To question is to sin. To dream is to risk death. Billions live and die in his service, never seeing the stars above their hive cities. Whole generations are born in darkness, their only purpose to labor and believe. And above them all, the Space Marines still fight. The Primarchs are gone, some dead, some lost, some cursed to eternity by chaos, but their sons, the chapters of the Adeptus still defend humanity's borders. They are few, 1,000 chapters, 1,000 warriors each, but they are enough to keep the night at bay. Across the galaxy, other powers stir. The Eldar, ancient and dying, dwell within their hidden craft worlds, haunted by the birth of the chaos god Slaanesh, born from their own decadence. The orcs, green and laughing, spread like weeds across the stars, living only for war and endless battle. The Necrons, metal husks of long-dead kings, begin to awaken from their tombs beneath forgotten worlds. And in the void beyond known space, the Tyranids drift, vast swarms of hunger given form, devouring everything in their path. The galaxy is alive with danger, and humanity endures only through stubborn faith. In the heart of Terra, the Golden Throne still hums. The Emperor's body remains there, neither living nor dead, sustained by 1,000 souls sacrificed every day to feed his divine light. His spirit watches through the warp, guiding the Astronomicon, the great psychic beacon that allows ships to navigate the stars. Every vessel that sails through the warp follows that single flickering light, the Emperor's eternal gaze. Without it, the Imperium would fall in days. But even this light is fading. Each century, it grows a little dimmer. Each year, the warp storms grow stronger. The Imperium decays, not in a sudden collapse, but in slow, endless exhaustion. The machines grow older. The knowledge to repair them is forgotten. Priests mutter prayers instead of equations. The past becomes myth, and the truth that the Emperor never wanted to be worshipped is buried beneath 10,000 years of faith. Still, the warriors fight. The Imperial Guard, billions of men and women from every world, hold the front lines with courage and desperation. The Sisters of Battle, the holy daughters of the Ecclesia, burn heretics and protect the faithful. The Grey Knights, born in secret from the ashes of the heresy, battle demons with psychic fire. Their names never spoken, their deeds never known, and beyond the veil of reality, the chaos gods laugh and plot. Each soul that prays too loudly, each warrior who kills in hate, feeds their power. It is a cruel balance. The more humanity believes in its divine emperor, the more the warp hungers for its fall. 10,000 years of this. 10,000 years of flickering light in endless dark. And yet, the Imperium still stands. Every dawn that breaks upon a hive world, every child who whispers a prayer, every soldier who raises their weapon is a spark of defiance. Humanity does not thrive, but it endures. And in the shadows, some whisper that not all hope is lost. For on distant Macragge, a sun once lost will soon awaken. For 10,000 years, the Emperor sat unmoving upon his throne. For 10,000 years, the Imperium struggled to survive. Its faith, its shield, its fear, its prison. But the galaxy had grown tired. The warp storms had grown wild again. And in that chaos, something ancient stirred. It began with a tear, a wound across the fabric of reality, ripping the galaxy in half. It was called the cicatrix, the Great Rift, a vast scar of madness and fire stretching from one end of the Milky Way to the other. Through it poured the voices of demons, the laughter of gods, and the screams of a billion dying worlds. For many, it was the end. The Astronomicon flickered, warp travel collapsed, and the night became absolute. But amid the despair, a light awoke. On the world of Macragge, a Primarch stirred from timeless sleep. Robut, the son of order and reason, the Lord of Ultramar, opened his eyes once more. He had slept since the days of the heresy, his body preserved by stasis, his wounds tended by faith and science intertwined. Now, through the work of a strange and brilliant being, the tech priest Belisarius called, and perhaps the Emperor's own unseen will, Guilliman lived again. He rose into a galaxy he did not recognize. The Imperium he had once helped to build was now a labyrinth of superstition, decay, and worship. The Emperor he had served as father and master was now revered as a god, and Guilliman wept. He did not weep for himself, but for what humanity had become, for what had been lost. Yet, even in his grief, he did not falter. He saw that the Imperium still endured, still fought, still prayed, still believed, and so he vowed to save it, not through miracles, but through will. From the ashes of the Great Rift, he forged a new age, the Indomitus Crusade. It was a campaign unlike any before it. Fleets the size of continents, armies beyond counting, new soldiers born of science and faith. The Primaris Space Marines, these were the Emperor's angels reborn, taller, stronger, and more steadfast. Guilliman sent them forth, not only to fight, but to rekindle the light of hope. World by world, the crusade restored the shattered Imperium. There was no celebration, no triumph, only endurance, only quiet determination. For 10,000 years, the Emperor sat unmoving upon his throne. For 10,000 years, the Imperium struggled, its faith, its shield, its fear, its prison. But the galaxy had grown tired. The warp storms had grown wild again, and in that chaos, something ancient stirred. It began with a tear, a wound across the fabric of reality, ripping the galaxy in half. It was called the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Great Rift, a vast scar of madness and fire stretching from one end of the Milky Way to the other. Through it poured the voices of demons, the laughter of gods, and the screams of a billion dying worlds. For many, it was the end. The Astronomicon flickered. Warp travel collapsed. and the night became absolute. But amid the despair, a light awoke on the world of Macragge. A Primarch stirred from timeless sleep. Robert Gilliman, the son of order and reason, the Lord of Ultramar, opened his eyes once more. He had slept since the days of the heresy, his body preserved by stasis, his wounds tended by faith and science intertwined. Now, through the work of a strange and brilliant being, the tech priest Belisarius Call, and perhaps the Emperor's own unseen will, Gilliman lived again. He rose into a galaxy he did not recognize. The Imperium he had once helped to build was now a labyrinth of superstition, decay, and worship. The Emperor he had served as father and master was now revered as a god, and Gilliman wept. He did not weep for himself, but for what humanity had become, for what had been lost. Yet, even in his grief, he did not falter. He saw that the Imperium still endured, still fought, still prayed, still believed, and so he vowed to save it, not through miracles, but through will. From the ashes of the Great Rift, he forged a new age, the Indomitus Crusade. It was a campaign unlike any before it. Fleets the size of continents, armies beyond counting, new soldiers born of science and faith, the Primaris Space Marines. These were the Emperor's angels reborn, taller, stronger, and more steadfast than their forebears. Gilliman sent them forth, not only to fight, but to rekindle the light of hope, world by world. The crusade restored the shattered Imperium. There was no celebration, no triumph, only endurance, only quiet determination